Good to go, and the clock strikes 4.
That's a long minute.
We are. Okay, very good. All right. Well, good afternoon. I'll call this meeting of Committee of the Whole to order for Wednesday, April the 5th. I'll also acknowledge that the meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of Tla'amin Nation. And I'd like to add a further acknowledgement and a congratulations to Tla'amin Nation. Today is the 7th anniversary of their nationhood, of the taking effect of their treaty, and they have been a nation now for 7 full years. So congratulations to you. All right, directors, you have the agenda in front of you with the addition of the item under 9.2. The motion, I mean. So could I please have a motion to adopt the agenda? Lennox and Gisborne, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Adoption of the minutes of March the 1st. Are there any errors or omissions? Okay, seeing no hands, motion to adopt, please. Okay, Lennox and Gisborne. Any discussion? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Delegations and inquiries. So we have 2 registered delegations. Paul Cummings from Townsite Jazz Festival is listed first, but I don't see him here, and Staff Sergeant Wiebe is here. So the agreement of committee members, and you can just not allow Staff Sergeant Wiebe to go first if that's great with you.
Thank you.
And you have 10 minutes, and we look forward to your presentation.
PowerPoint or the plan save?
I can do that.
Thank you, Chair. I can certainly go without it.
Right here.
Thicker.
I just have the PDF version, so if you just let me know.
Okay. All right, perfect. All right. Okay, so next slide, please. So detachment establishment hasn't changed in the last number of years for the provincial side. The province still funds 8 positions, which is a corporal supervisor frontline policing position, a corporal GIS commander who is in charge of our medium crime and drug unit, 3 constables for frontline policing, 2 constables on Texada Island, and 1 constable who does Indigenous policing services. Next slide, please. So the average full-time equivalent vacancy over the last couple of years, the provincial side of things was relatively untouched in about 2021, at which time we started to experience similar situations with the city FTs, which is people going off. The detachment operated between 58 and 75% strength this year, and the amount of overtime needed to cover these shortages is leading to officer burnout, which leads to increased time away from work. As you'll see for 2022, the provincial side was running 2 vacancies. The year before that was 3. So when you take small numbers like that, it's a significant amount of the workforce. With the recent announcement of the provincial government with the $300 and somewhat million injected in provincial policing, we're hoping that we're going to see some of that funding to increase our establishment. We have put in a request for 2 extra members, and the rationale is heavily reliant on supporting Texada Island. Of course, that 2-person detachment model is just not sustainable. So we're hoping we can get some provincial positions in Powell River that can help give the guys on Texada a break because they're there 24/7. Next slide, please. Overall calls for service were down 9% compared to last year. 2021 was the most significant call volume year that we've had in the 10 years I've been here. So the numbers are starting to go down a bit. Next slide, please. Crime stats overall. We kind of track a few that give us a barometer or placement of where we think things are going. So overall break and enters were down 28% last year. Theft under 5,000 complaints were up 10%. Assaults were down 16%. Impaired driving was down 16%. Drug offenses were down 44%. So the impaired driving, the drug offenses are very much proactive work on our part. So giving our human resource shortages, it only makes sense that those crimes were down because we didn't target them as much as we'd like. So it wasn't a surprise they were down that significant. And mental health calls, which also take up a bunch of our time, they're basically unchanged for 2022. Next slide, please. So when you take these crimes, they give them a rating and a region comes up with the crime severity index. So here we didn't do so well. Our region continues to climb the ranking ladder when it comes to CSI. We currently ranked 41st out of 326 police services across Canada. Just 5 years ago, we ranked 110th. And here, this is where you want a bigger number. So the 41 is not exceptional. So while the CSI is more forgiving for larger municipalities because it's based on per 100,000 capita, we're still top 5 for Island District. And our violent crime severity index is only better than Port Alberni, which is 10th, Courtenay, which is ranked 35th, and Nanaimo, which were ranked 39. So we're right in there with the big cities. Next slide, please. So overall, because we're a hybrid detachment, out of those 6,100 calls, 1,383 were the regional district, and that represents a 23% of all calls are in the regional district. Next slide, please. Calls for service. So this is a rural breakdown of the different areas that you're responsible for. So 1,393 calls represents a 12.8% decrease from the prior year. All areas of the regional district contributed to this decrease, led by Savory Island, which saw a decrease of 31% calls for service. That was followed up by the north area, 16% decrease, Texada 14% decrease, and the south area 12% decrease. Next slide, please. So trends for 2022, other agency support was very taxing on us. Pre-COVID practice was, especially for the courts and the sheriff's, bail hearings were done at the courthouse. The sheriff would come and pick up the prisoner, take him to court, and we wouldn't have to deal with them. Since COVID, they don't do that anymore. They stay in our cells. It was up to us to take the prisoner back and forth to the phone in the hearing room and sit there, while the courts phone, and then sit there while they do the hearing. So that was unheard of before COVID. So that is a significant amount of our time. As for the General Hospital, Mental Health Act continues to dominate a lot of our time. We pick up people who are in crises, we take them to the hospital, then we have to stay there until a doctor sees that person, assesses them, and decides whether they're going to be released or committed. Once they're committed, we're also getting called back for if they're a problem inside the hospital. If they have to give a shot and they're violent, we have to go and stand by. And if they let them out for a fresh air break and they run away, then we have to go and find them. Sometimes that can take hours, and sometimes that can take days. They're high risk, so it's a priority for us. So we drop everything that we're doing until we can find them and get them back to the hospital. Next slide, please. So last year, our priorities were road safety, crime reduction, youth, domestic violence, and employee wellness. And this year is yet to be set. This is one of my final consultations before we set our priorities. I can tell you they will be reduced. A greater focus on smaller areas. We are short, so I don't want to make a whole bunch of promises to people that I can't keep because especially with the RD and seasonal policing. I haven't done a very good job with that in the last couple of years. So we're hoping that things will improve over this year. And we're certainly hoping that the province will approve at least a position for Powell. We can see. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer those now.
Thank you very much, Staff Sergeant. I'll throw this now open to questions. Director Lennox. Go ahead.
Thanks for your presentation. Very informative. Just a couple of things. The drug offenses you mentioned are quite a significant drop.
Yes.
And it's a matter of interdiction probably, and not the ability of not being out in the community. Is that...
It's really because of our shortages. Our major crime and drug unit has been shut down for the past 18 months. They do this lion's share of that work. So where they would do the surveillance, the search warrants, because of where we're at right now, a lot of our attention now is trying to catch those traffickers on the road in a vehicle and deal with them that way. So it's certainly a lot less success in that area.
Just to follow up, thanks for clarifying the inversion of the local CSI. Okay, it looked like it actually went down, but that's a better explanation. So thanks for that. And just you mentioned Savory and the reduction in calls. What are your typical calls from Savory? People sort of anecdotally tell me about that from my area, but I'm not sure why.
Yeah. So the service we provided to Savory hasn't been as much as it has in the recent years. So I think that also has a reason why the calls are down, because we're not there. People don't want to bother us. Lots of liquor related offenses, thefts, disturbances like that. And it's certainly during the summer months, seasonal months. Yeah.
I have one more, but I'll let somebody else ask.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Director Brandon.
Thanks, Chair. Question, you mentioned you're hoping that the province will come up with money to provide another position. Is there a pool of officers to draw from, or is it similar to, say, the healthcare industry where there just aren't the people there?
Yeah, well, there's a catch there. The province has given this money to the RCMP. The RCMP will fill those positions within 3 years. Otherwise, they'll take them away. So I'll guarantee you we will be scrambling and doing everything we can to scrape and claw and get anybody we can in those positions.
Okay. But are they out there? Like the individuals are there, or it's a matter of attracting them to the community?
It's attracting. It's a lot of things. It's recruitment and getting them through depot, or it's finding seasoned police officers who are willing to come to the area. So it's going to be a challenge, but I think we'll be able to, if they provide those positions, we'll get them filled.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Director Doe.
Just looking at your priorities, and thanks for the report. Just looking at them, I'm seeing youth down there as a priority. I wonder if you could expound on that a little bit and fill us in on.
Oh, sure, and that's a lot to do with the community policing unit, which we've just reinstated. But her focus is going in schools and doing programs with them. Certainly doing recruitment and the youth, getting them set up, because you have to take a certain path as a youth to be able to become a police officer. So we like to get a lot on that track early. And then her other areas are the other community policing initiatives, but the schools are her focus on getting into the schools and getting them used to the uniform.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Director Joe. I have a quick question, and thank you very much for this report. It's great to hear what you've been up to, and some stats are good and clearly not others. So I hope you're successful in recruiting new officers. My question actually does pertain to the vacancy issue of hiring. And you said that you wanted 2 people based on Powell River to provide assistance to the Texada detachment. And I just wonder if you could elaborate a bit on what you meant by that.
Sure. So of course, there's 2 people. They are on call 24/7 when they're on the island. That means they're tied to a cell phone. They can't go any further than 10 or 15 minutes away from the detachment, because if their partner is in need, they need to be there quickly. It takes a toll. So they need time off. And currently, if they take time off, then their backup is Powell River, which means we're running down to our boat. We have to get 2 members. They're going over there, getting into the vehicle, and then backing our member up. So our member has to stage and stay back until the backup arrives.
Mhm.
So with this support, we'll be able to better place people over there, which we haven't normally done. Of course, there's mandatory training that the members on Texada have to do. So every time we take a member off of the island, it would be nice to have someone to backfill that automatically, so there's not that wait. That's our big hope. Also, the other hope is that with those positions, we can better serve the entire area and take a better role in seasonal policing.
Thank you very much, Staff Sergeant. Any further questions? Director Powell.
Yes, so Chair, thank you for being here this afternoon. Appreciate your reports all the time, and in terms of what we're doing here locally. You know, this is a big contentious issue as far as safety and what's happening throughout the province. It's debated in the legislation in Victoria today, for example, at length. And I think one of the things that is your biggest problem, from what I've been able to gather, is not only the red tape that you're facing, but the inability to press any charges by your members, and the catch and release policy that the courts have implemented. It's just, you know, it was said today in the legislature when I took a look at TV for 5 minutes, that throughout the province, it isn't working. It's like a lawless society out there because of the red tape, catch and release, you name it. Business owners are feeling threatened. They're being harmed in numerous ways, and theft is a big issue. I don't know where we go, but do you see any light coming down the tunnel to help you out in this regard?
I see a little light. Attorney General has changed some of their policy and direction they've given to the local Crown Council, so I'm hoping that's going to help. But ultimately, until the criminal code and really the Supreme Court changes some of the edicts that they've put down that our judges have to follow, it's going to be a tough road ahead until we kind of get the pendulum back a little bit towards. There's some prolific offenders out there that they just need to be in jail. They can't function out here. As soon as they're released, they go back and do it again. So those are truly the offenders that the courts need to take a second look at.
Yeah, I just going to give the example to the board. We had several vehicles recently damaged at Wiebe as cabin owners are starting to go up the lake overnight. They have an individual using credit cards from one of those vehicles in a couple of the stores in town, and can't even press charges because of all the red tape that's involved. And you know, even though you've got it on film, using those credit cards, you can't charge that individual. That's how bad it is. So it's just a prime example of what we're up against. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Through the chair, just a reminder that the police do not press charges. We recommend charges to Crown, and only Crown can approve charges. So
You have a success rate? How much actually?
I don't have that success rate.
Okay, thank you. Director Gisborne.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've got friends that are working construction and they find their tools get stolen. They go onto Facebook Swap and Shop. They see their tools with their name on it and they can't do anything to get them back. And that must be really frustrating for the RCMP. And that must be really hard to then recruit people, because when someone goes, well, what job do I want to work in? And they want to be in a job that they can be successful. And if they're going in and they're not being able to get that, you know, get movement, I wouldn't want to do that.
It's very frustrating. You can see it take a toll on the members. Absolutely. So it's going to change.
So just want to thank the members that are still around, because I know it's kind of a thankless job and there's a lot of stigma attached with policing. My question, the Mass Casualty Commission recently released a 1,000-something page report. I haven't read it.
Nor have I.
They have a number of recommendations, and of course those would all be decided in Ottawa. And are
Are you hearing of any potential implementation of those recommendations, and would some of them potentially have a benefit to the organizations on the ground, or is there something that maybe we can help with to, get more recruitment and retention, or?
So all reports such as this, it'll take a very long time for the RCMP to review it, for the minister to review it and come down with some type of a plan. And these inquiries, what they lay down are just recommendations, so they don't necessarily have to be followed. I'm sure there's stuff in there that we are going to take under advisement and change some of our processes. A horrific a day for Nova Scotia. And I can imagine being in that position, even with all the training that we have. Something like that just is unimaginable. So it'll be interesting to see what comes down. But that is at the federal government and federal RCMP level. So appreciate your support. I don't think at this
what I keep hearing is the RCMP officers, not just here, but even what was going on over there, was they're just too much on the plate and just rushing from one thing to another. And I don't see that as a way to actually get good policing for the community.
No, it comes down to resources, and the RCMP is notorious for doing more with less, which at times is good, and other times when things like this happen and we don't have resources to draw on, it kind of magnifies some issues too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director Gisborne. I just draw director's attention to the clock, and not that we want to cut this short. But are there any further questions for Staff Sergeant? Seeing no hands, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Our next delegation, I would welcome Paul Cummings. Yes.
I made it.
And again, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Boy, it's my pleasure to be back here again. Just presenting before you here, the Cothat Regional District Board. So thank you for having me. Big smile on my face because the Townsite Jazz Festival is coming up next week. 8 days, my students told me today. And so for anybody who doesn't know anything about the Townsite Jazz Festival, or myself, I'm a high school music educator at Brooks Secondary School, bands and choirs and all that kind of thing. I've been there since year 2000. And I really like jazz, and I really like teaching. So I combined, I put a festival together with a great group of people, and it's a very, very unique festival. I'm sure there's nothing else like it on earth. It's just a beautiful blend of high school jazz programs meet the professionals. 2022, last year we came out of COVID, having skipped a couple of festivals because of COVID. I think we were the first event to come out of those restrictions when Dr. Bonnie Henry said we could start putting people back in public spaces. So we had 7 weeks to put together a festival last year, and we had 7 concerts, and 6 out of those 7 concerts sold out. We're really pleased with how it all came together, and the smiles on people's faces to be back out in our community was really, really fantastic. But I'm here to talk to you about 2023. It's just looking absolutely sensational. We have 36 professional musicians that are coming to town. Actually, one of those 36 lives in town here. That would be our very own Walter Martella. And the groups range from individual musicians. Celso Machado from Brazil is here as a solo artist, ranging up to a full 18-piece big band that will be playing at Dwight Hall during our gala closing. We've got artists that have come from as close as Powell River and as far away as Newfoundland, still keeping it in the country. So we're getting broader and more diverse and growing every year. Student groups, we max out at 6 student groups. So we have 3 Powell River groups. From Brooks, we have a jazz band, a jazz combo, and a vocal jazz ensemble. And this year we're bringing in a vocal jazz group and a jazz combo from Reynolds Secondary School in Victoria. and a jazz band from Glen Eagle Secondary in Coquitlam. And it's really important, especially for my students, to meet other kids that are like-minded and are immersed in jazz, and they can see how their programs work and, you know, what kind of music they're doing. And I think most importantly is just have some sort of social interaction with kids from outside of Powell River. So that's with all of them, I think that adds up to about 70 or 75 students in grade 10, 11, and 12. Our volunteers are absolutely the best. I just can't believe, especially when we get closer to the festival, I'm rubbing shoulders with all kinds of people that are involved with the festival at all sorts of different levels, whether it's a grade 10 student that's on stage crew, or someone that's been in our community and volunteering their hours their whole life. It's really, really remarkable that Powell River still is able to churn out, you know, the best of the best volunteers in my view. Venues, we have 9 venues. I kind of shot myself in the foot there. That's a lot of work and a lot of moving around of gear. But we've got 9 venues in the Townsite and in Westview this year. And we are so lucky. I don't know if people in this town realize how lucky we are to have the Dwight Halls and the Max Cameron Theaters and the Evergreen Theaters. You know, you go take the ferry over to Courtenay, they've got the Sid Williams Theater. That's it, right? It's either that or start holding concerts in churches. Nothing wrong with that, but again, we're just so lucky to have the venues we have. New for this year for us is the Patricia Theater, which is almost sold out at 266 seats for this little Brazilian salsa machado. Brooks Hall, also known as the Brooks Cafeteria, has an event there called Jazz and Charcuterie. And that is a completely Brooks student and staff driven part of our festival. The culinary arts are putting together an unbelievable German culinary charcuterie for all the people that are coming out to that. So that's looking fantastic. We're tapping into the Carlson Loft, which has recently had quite a few upgrades done to it, especially with the sound system. I don't know if you're aware of that. Coastal Cookery will be in there for a Saturday lunch. That's new to us as well. And one of our free concerts is at Royal Zyka, which is going to be great. People are going to be able to sit down and have dinner there and enjoy a concert. So we've got 12 sort of concerts that are 12 concerts. 2 of them are free concerts, one at Royal Zyka and the other one at the brewery, and the other ones are just all over the place. The highlights of the festival, it's really hard for me to narrow it down to just 2 or 3 or 4 things, but the Jazz and Charcuterie concert, I think, is going to be very, very special. And that has taken the place of what we used to call the jazz dinner. Brooks had a jazz dinner for 20 years. And it turned out to be a lot of jazz happening at Brooks. So now we've taken the jazz dinner and we've incorporated it into the jazz festival. It was a fundraiser for the Brooks music program. Now it's part of the festival. However, all the proceeds from that concert still go back to the Brooks to support the Brooks music program and their trip to Cuba for next year. And we have 4 high school ensembles that are performing at the Jazz and Charcuterie. And when they're finished performing, there is the world-class John Lee Trio that does the second half of the performance. And the cool thing is the student groups have their choice of anybody in the John Lee Trio to come and sit in with them, right? So they could have the guitar player or John Lee himself come and play bass with the group. All of the ticketed concerts, most all of the ticketed concerts, the student groups open for those concerts. So they have a chance to open in a professional setting for professionals and for a full packed audience, which I think is fantastic. I've mentioned Salsa Machado, his concert. And always, it's just the most incredible spectrum of our community that comes out to our gala closing concerts at Dwight Hall. And this year we have the 18-piece Bruce James Orchestra performing there, and it's a family-friendly event. So we have everything like moms and dads dancing with their kids on their shoulders, and right up to people the age of my parents, for example. And a little special treat on that night, we've put together an alumni vocal jazz group for anybody who has performed in vocal jazz at Max Cameron or at Brook Secondary at Ocean View. We have 18 vocalists ranging in age from 18 to, I shouldn't say the age, upside of 80, singing in the group. It's a fantastic group. There's 12 locals and 6 out-of-towners that are coming home for that. And plus all the rhythm section, piano, bass, drums, and guitar are also former students in there. So that's going to be really special. Do I have any time left? Am I over time?
You have 1 minute.
Oh, that's perfect. I'm nailing this. Good. Last time I spoke, I got this a few times. And then finally, we, of course, always, well, not of course, but always thinking to next year into the future and what do we want to do with the festival. And we would like to grow it. We would like to continue to work on quality, make sure that it's available to people of all different economical backgrounds. We'd like to bring more artists in from farther away and people that are maybe not household names, you know, like the Michael Bublé's of the world, but people that will be an attraction for more audience to come out. And we would like to be able to attract more people from outside of Canada and attract people from outside of this town to come and continue to come and take in our town and the event. We're starting a concert series. We're going to have an annual concert series now that starts with our first concert on June 2nd. And we're hoping to have these concerts work their way around the area. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Your timing is perfect. Right.
Gave me that.
Directors may have questions for you, so just hang on for a sec. Questions? Seeing, okay, 2 hands. Director Lennox, Director.
So once again, I'm a product of this type of a program. I mean, I think back to jazz choir and band and being able to travel. And you mentioned the connections that youth make when they get either have people come to town or go out of town. And that happened to me. Been part of my children's musical upbringing as well. And seeing it from that perspective reinforces the need to support these things in our community. And I just want to know what the date of that alumni jazz.
Well, it's on Friday. Okay. No, I beg your pardon, Saturday the 15th, okay. And they'll be on stage at 7:30. And if you can't come there, you can come catch the dress rehearsal. That's even going to be more fun. And that's at 1 o'clock that same day, Saturday the 15th at Dwight Hall.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Joe.
And you know, I was at the Jazz Festival pre-COVID, and last year, great. I enjoyed the concerts there, and the students were way above what I expected when I went to the concerts. And you know, if you want to know where your friends are in Powell River, go to one of the Jazz Festival concerts because your friends are there volunteering. I'm just, you know, saying back to you what you said. It is amazing the number of volunteers in this community that come out to the woodwork and support things like this, and it's just a great place to do it. One of the very sad things about this is that April 13th, 14th, 15th, I and most of the other members of the Regional District Board will be in Nanaimo at a municipal conference that we go to every year. So I'm sadly not going to be at any of those things. But hopefully next year there won't be a conflict.
I'll have to block it out.
And if I can just echo with the comment that, you know, events like this really make our community a rich and vibrant place. So I really applaud what you're doing, and thank you very much for your presentation. And I'm sure we will see you again.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, directors, we are now on to, there's no unfinished business. Correspondence, we have 6 items of correspondence. Is there any business arising from these items? Director Gisborne.
I have one question.
Which item are you referring to?
6.2.
Okay.
UBCM president read provincial response to 2022 resolutions. I see the responses in relation to the styrofoam and marine environment.
Yeah.
But didn't we also ask them a resolution about funding improvement districts?
We did ask for a resolution that called for a one-time fund, one-time new fund that could provide relief to improvement districts seeking to upgrade their water systems. And
I was hoping we'd get a response.
Well, that's interesting that we haven't, so maybe I can follow that up with her. Okay, thank you for
my question.
Yeah, no, I remember it clearly, so I will follow that up. Okay, any other item? No business arising. All right, we can move on then to reports. 8.1, the on the road board meeting in August, and there's a 2-part recommendation there, and it looks like we're going to Lasqueti.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, Director Powell. Okay, Director Lennox seconded it. Discussion, Director Powell.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say I appreciated some of the words in the report about the importance of these on the road meetings and the prioritization of Lasqueti. I'm very pleased to see this, and I think it will be really useful for the community to see see the board come, and I think it'll be useful for the board too and staff who haven't been to Lasqueti, who haven't been there for a while. And ideally, I hope that when the board and staff do come, that it's early enough to get a bit of a tour, at least you can see at least the RD parts of Lasqueti and maybe some of the natural parts as well, but the recycling depot and things like that, and maybe Boot Point Park with some nice regional parks and other places that are beautiful to see.
Well, I echo that sentiment. I think it would be wonderful to see. The last time we did an on the road to Lasqueti, I remember we went to the fire hall, the Judith Fisher Center, which wasn't built yet. It was still under construction. And that goes back a ways, but I'd love to see some of the other places Director Fall is referencing. So I'm sure staff are paying attention to this conversation. Any other discussion? Director Dow.
Having not been on an on-the-road trip to Lasqueti before, I'm wondering if staff would be making arrangements for transportation and when they would do that and how long the trip is going to be and all of that stuff.
Okay, well, it does say by water taxi in the report, but perhaps Ms. Jones has further information about that.
Thank you. Through the chair, I think Shelley Tremende, the communication advisor, has made arrangements for this event.
Welcome, Shelley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, to answer Director Doubt's question, that is correct. We have made tentative arrangements for water taxi, and the plan is to deliver the directors to Lasqueti Island in the morning, and with the stop in Texada to support the Area D director, and then to make that return trip home. It's estimated that I believe the trip is approximately 2.5 hours, but I have to confirm on the overall details. And of course, that's subject to weather conditions as well.
Yes, that's a good point. What happens if that happens to be a stormy day and the wind blows and we don't go? But I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So thank you very much. Is there any further discussion on this? Director Palm.
I just want to add that I was fortunate enough when I was on the RD board to make that trip down to Lasqueti Island. It was one of my favorite moments of being on the RD board. Really enjoyed the day interacting with other directors and getting to see the island first. It's fantastic.
It is true. Okay, so any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Associate member insurance. Oh, that was only item 1. That's right. Okay. So now we're on recommendation number 2.
I'll move the second recommendation.
Okay. Gisborne and Paul. Discussion on this recommendation. Director Gisborne.
I think Texada is nice to visit. It's good.
I think you do too, and I look forward to being able to arrange a little tour. We live very close to the park, so Shelter Point Park is easy. But to see the community hall and some of the other things that we have that are RD facilities. So our library and our museum, which is of course funded through our Heritage Commission. So seeing no further discussion, all in favor of number 2? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, now we're on to 8.2. Associate member insurance for Courtney Robertson. One recommendation. Yeah. So
We'll move the
everything is
recommendation.
ants and ants. So, okay, the recommendation is Director Lennox, seconded. Discussion. Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Great, we are on to the Kids Don't Float Station at Shelter Point Park. Is there a mover for this recommendation? Director Lennox, thank you. Director Fall, second. Discussion. Director Lennox.
Well, I think we've all agreed that this is an excellent program, and if we can help, save one child by supporting this, I think it's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And you see kids, the park is chock-a-block with kids all summer long, and how, prepared every family is with the younger ones. I can't really say because I haven't done a study on it, but I know it will be much appreciated and well used. So any further discussion? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. All right, we are on to the Joint Accessibility and Inclusion Advisory Committee, and this is one recommendation in total. Is there a recommendation? Paul, Director Brander, yeah, discussion. Director Fall.
Thank you, Chair. I really support this. The ABC Act defines disability as an inability to participate fully and equally in society as a result of the interaction of an impairment and a barrier. So society has a role in creating disabilities by creating and not removing barriers that interact with impairments experienced by individuals. A compassionate society acknowledges this reality and takes steps to reduce such barriers faced by some of our residents and visitors, which is the intent of both the Act and the motion before us. I also think a joint committee makes sense, not just to share knowledge, resources, and costs, which are very good reasons, but also because when people face similar barriers in different situations, they don't really care about the jurisdiction. So I think, the committee can look at the barriers from the perspective of people who face them, and then make appropriate recommendations back to the jurisdictions that may be able to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Director Gisborne.
Yeah, I echo the comments of Director Fall. I've got some experience with, working with people with disabilities, and he's absolutely right. A lot of people don't necessarily know the jurisdiction of which or where. And I just recall a number of years ago, I think it was the Dwight Hall or something like that. My father went to get into it, and there was the asphalt kind of settled. So there was a 2-inch gap, and he had some trouble getting into it. Well, because of Stan's history, he sent an email to Russell Brewer and was like, hey, this is yours, and get it fixed. But most people don't know, like, what's regional district, what's municipality, and, who necessarily to contact. And that's where a joint accessibility and inclusion advisory committee kind of helps look at the broader picture and then work with the different stakeholders and shareholders. And sometimes it's as simple as, well, we're pretty sure that's wheelchair accessibility, but sometimes the ground settles and, an inch or two, we don't even notice it. My height, I don't usually see that far down. But when you're in a wheelchair, you actually do experience that. So,
And this ball started rolling with the Social Action Planning Advisory Committee a year, perhaps 2 years ago. An accessibility subcommittee was created to address some of the concerns that had been brought to 3 governments, and those were seriously considered. And if that committee gets going again, obviously we won't need this subcommittee because we will have a standing committee, which I think is a really good move to be doing. So any further discussion on this item? Seeing no hands, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. All right, we're under new business, and there's 2 items. The first is the active transportation corridor. And would someone kindly move this recommendation? Director Gisborne, Director Lennox, thank you. I'd like to open comments regarding this by saying that active transportation corridors have a rather checkered past on Texada. Interesting history. Around 2012 to 14, just before I was elected to the board, there was a path started in Gillies Bay around the same time that Paget Road got started. But unlike Paget Road, the path that was created on Texada was very controversial. And a lot of people more people, I suppose, were upset by it than pleased by it. And for a variety of reasons that don't really matter now. But since that time, there was a survey that I did when I started in 2015, and majority of the respondents said, no, we don't want to continue with this project. So there it has sat since then. So during the election campaign this fall, I talked to people about, how do you feel about active transportation corridors, AKA bike paths, and this is the history and so on. And generally, there was agreement that we should revisit this topic. So in January, I conducted both a survey and a public meeting on Texada, which I have reported out through the director's reports. But the result was 72% people who responded to the survey and the meeting support the bike path. Some people didn't because they wanted the money spent on fixing roads and water systems, but that aside, 72%, which is a pretty solid number for an island that had last voted to not have anything to do with it. So I think the people of Texada want to move forward with an active transportation corridor. We are the largest island in the Salish Sea without 1 square inch devoted to active transportation. So there's compelling reasons for doing so. And people support green initiatives on the island and also doing what we can to support climate change mitigation. So this motion calls for a report back, but it's the first step in getting that ball rolling and hopefully getting people running and rolling and biking as a result. So, okay, Director Gisborne.
Thank you.
You've already spoken on this once, so I'm going to throw it open to any other directors who have a comment, and seeing no hands, Director Gisborne.
Well, thank you. I must have forgotten something. I support this motion. Active transportation is important. I just wanted to bring up that, because Paget Road was, the other project at the time. One of the challenges that came up, because originally it was, okay, let's kind of widen Paget so that we can have some cycling and walking. One of the kind of problems with how, just in North America in general, we've done active transportation is that we put the active transportation right next to the road. And drivers, they start seeing a wider, straighter road, so they start going faster, and then people feel even less safe to be, say, walking on the shoulder of the road. And one of the terms I recently heard was vehicular cycling, and that's where people are doing active transportation, but they're cycling as though they're a vehicle, and that's really hard for like getting small kids or people with strollers to kind of be using that same infrastructure. And that's where there's becoming kind of like a new push to try and segregate the vehicle active transportation from the the active transportation, and trying to get away from like the vehicle exhaust and having vehicles going by, and what's the other term is, sometimes they call it the bicycle gutter. And that's just something that I would kind of hope that we can potentially avoid. Sometimes there's no avoiding it, you got to have it next to a road, but if there's a way to kind of make a shorter distance without having to go by the road, kind of like the Myrtle Creek Bridge connecting Centennial with the Bradford area, that's a way to really make it a more improved community asset. So I'm sure that'll all come up in the staff report. So my other question though I had was, because the Area D official community plan was recently adopted, does that outline some maps or locations for active transportation? I don't recall it off the top of my head.
No, it supports active transportation, but doesn't identify. And the route actually that people preferred, because that was one of the questions on my survey, was the part between Gillies Bay and Shelter Point Park. So that was I do know that if you have your path attached to the road, I know the downside of the speeding, but MOTI pays for half of it, whereas if you do it in a segregated manner, they don't pay. So there's a financial issue, you know, to keep in mind when we get to that point. So I have Director Doe.
Yeah, and just picking up on where we are, the motion is for an active transportation corridor. And I would hope that when staff reports back, they do all the considerations of an active transportation corridor. The best one I have seen anywhere in my travels in a rural area is the active transportation corridor it goes from Tofino all the way to Ukiah now. Large sections of it are in the park, the national park there, but the one not in the national park is generally built well off the highway on a service, a potable water service pipeline. So they put the pipeline well off of the highway so they don't have to dig up the highway every time somebody gets a water service. They've paved the top of it with a nice wide bike lane so you can safely ride your bicycle, not connected to the highway. It's not a wide shoulder. It's an active transportation corridor. The downside to that, I guess, is it costs more money. And you know, I just want to be careful how I say this. A lot of people are happy to want things, and the idea of paying for it is another thing. So, you know, the idea of an active transportation corridor report and some idea of the cost at the same time would be, I think, a smart thing to do.
Yeah, thank you.
But I support the idea. It's great to have.
Yes, thank you. And I would agree with you that that part through Pacific Rim Park is really amazing. Yeah, we've been there and been on it. So seeing no further hands, we will vote. All in favor of the recommendation? Any opposed? Carried unanimous. 9.2, approaching the marine ramp on Lasqueti, Director Powell.
Okay, I'll make the motion that's as written, but with the addition of the word staff between joint and meeting. So it's to ask the board to direct staff to send a letter to MOTI to request a joint staff meeting with the QRD and the Islands Trust.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Director Gisborne. Did you wish to speak to this, Director Paul?
Yes, I'll be brief. I have talked about this previously at the board meeting. So the regional district, there's a marine ramp, a barge ramp that's used for receiving goods, boat launches. You know, it's used for quite frequently. We use it to remove garbage and recycling, or residual waste and recycling leaves Lasqueti by barge there. So it gets used regularly. The regional district, it's a service, so the regional district has a license of occupation just for the ramp itself, which is a concrete apron. So our license of occupation ends probably maybe 15 feet above the high water mark. And then there's a road about 100 meters long, a Ministry of Transportation road, a regular road that connects to the rest of the road network. And according to ministry rules, you're not allowed to place goods on a road. You're just not allowed to do it. And that's very inconvenient for things coming from barge, because if you have to move things by, say, a forklift onto a truck, that's a little bit less safe than putting it on the ground and letting people put it in their trucks themselves. Also, barges arrive at any time of the day and night. They don't want to stay too long. They want to come in, unload, get away. Maybe they're there at 2 a.m, you know, at unpredictable times because they're, you know, stopping by on their way up to, you know, Prince Rupert or wherever they're going. So the discussion we had with the Islands Trust meeting was, you know, basically a compliance issue. And the first step is to reach out to the ministry just to start inquiring about the possibility of options to have a license of occupation. If we could extend that, and the regional district would be the body to do it, the Islands Trust may have to do some, you know, land use bylaw or OCP amendment, but just to extend out and see what would be possible, because the ideal would be that we would have a license that would allow the use that would help without incurring costs of maintenance of the road and so on. So we're just wanting to, this is just the first step, and maybe it'll lead to another step with between politicians, between elected representatives and staff and the ministry. So this is just to ask that first step to see if the CAOs or other staff members can talk with the district manager and start inquiring about this possibility.
Okay. Thank you, Director Paul. Questions from members at the table? I'm not seeing any hands up. So I think we've convinced everyone. So we will have a vote then on the recommendation. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay, so now we are on to question period. Does anyone have any questions out there of the committee?
Hi, Chair. Galinsky from the Peak here. I don't have any questions this afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Paul. We're not seeing anyone else come forward. So item 11 is our proposed closed session. Would someone like to read this recommendation?
Oh, sure. I move that the committee move in camera that the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations, G, litigation or potential litigation affecting the regional district, I, the receipt of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a regional district service that are at their preliminary stages, and that, in the view of the committee, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the regional district if they were held in public, and then the consideration of whether a committee meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Thank you. Seconded by Director Lennox. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. We'll be going in camera.
So I'm only good at that, but I've only been able to do this twice in one breath. I had to take 3 breaths this time, so. Figured let's get it out of my system.
Good job.
Thank you.
gonna say they won't.
Very, wait for no one.
We have about
Maybe an ambulance.
hints and that we will be back in here and ready to go. Be care, we're good to go.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome back to Committee of the Whole. We have no rising reports and we is adjourned.
Yeah, anytime right now. Thank you for sailing with BC areas. I go, well, it's gonna swim, but it's a little cold today.
Anybody
Thanks,
who has
everyone.